Welcome to Full Metal RPG. I'm Richie Buzzkill, and today I have the great pleasure to bring back to the show the OG homie, Diogo Nogueira, who has published about 30 games since the last time we talked, and probably is going to finish another 2 in the next hour while we're talking about one of his favorite subjects, weird fantasy. Thanks for coming back to the show, Diogo. How you been? It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a really long time, right? And because of the pandemic, it's an even longer time. Because for me, anything that is like before the pandemic seems like 10 years ago or something.
For sure. Like this is a different. We're in a different age. Like there has been a delineator.
Oh, yeah.
And
we're in a post-apocalyptic fantasy modern age.
Yeah, so for sure. This is like one of those apocalypses that we've always read about, except it was sort of dumber.
Yeah, much dumber, much.
Yeah, much dumber.
we wouldn't believe it if we're playing this, and people are saying that. Oh, come on, GM, that's ridiculous. People won't be doing this.
Clearly, they'll be smarter than that. Like, why would this take out this many people and bring us to our knees? Like, this is ridiculous. So, So
I've been good. I've been learning a lot, and I think getting better. And I haven't written 30 games. I'm not that fast. I mean, I have maybe like a 5 or 6 games already written that I couldn't get published yet, but I've published some stuff, and I managed to win an award, like the Annie Awards for the.
Oh, congratulations, man! King. Congratulations, that's amazing. We always forget to put in for the Annies. It's so weird that you have to self-nominate, but I totally get.
Yeah,
you know, for your work.
That was the first time. I think that was the first time any of my work was submitted, because I didn't submit before. For me, from being like an indie publisher from outside of the US, the cost of submitting for like 6 judges was more than I could pay initially, and then afterwards, me and my partner didn't want to send stuff to awards for some reason, for reasons we had. But with Gavin Norman and Necrotic Gnome, they sent the book, and I was really surprised just for being nominated. I was like, wow. I was not expecting it at all, because they sent adventures for all the adventures they published that Kickstarter, they sent that time. And I wouldn't expect mine to be the one nominated, yeah.
Right, and it's amazing. I really think that it's great that we get a slightly more diverse audience in that crowd once we get. But yeah, the shipping of actual product to those judges is kind of a high barrier to entry for a lot of people. So I'm hoping that maybe the digital era will eventually catch up to those people, and we can just send them PDFs.
Yeah, you can send only PDFs, but it's rare to see any game that actually gets nominated that hadn't sent a print copy. I haven't seen that yet, like, because when you go to the awards, they have all the books that were sent that were nominated there. Presents people can see, and they have the booth where they can buy stuff. So if you don't send your print copy, what they will present there, I don't know.
Right. Here's a screen with a rotating picture of the cover of the things that are. That
could work maybe. But I haven't seen that there. I went to 2 ceremonies. and I haven't seen anything like that there. Just physical copies.
Right. Okay. Well, they're going to have to do a lot of reformatting because they lost the
Yeah.
Diana Jones Award. So
Yeah.
it's a weird behind the scene industry thing, but they have to find a copy of the old Indiana Jones book game and burn it again because that was inside the award.
Wow.
And they shipped it and did not certify the mail and lost it. So
Wow.
yeah, pretty crazy. Speaking of pretty crazy, the topic we're here to talk about is weird fantasy, and I want you to I'm going to take you move over Tolkien, step aside Robert Jordan, put down that pipe and finish your fucking book, George R.R. Martin. We're talking about weird fantasy where, fantasy turns on its head. We got all kinds of genres, fantasy, horror, sci-fi, supernatural, all crashing into each other into this weird fantasy tradition. Kind of, you said, "Oh, this is my jam" when I said this, and I want to know kind of like how you find it, how you got into it. Give me a little your back end for this.
Well, my way into this was basically Dungeon Crawl Classics, because I think before Dungeon Crawl Classics, I really liked comics, like the heavy metal hurlant comics, and I love them for the weirdness of it, the art. It had some sexual content, and for a teenager who didn't have access to anything, that was cool too. And before that we had like Master of the Universe, like it's fantasy, it's sci-fi, it's weird stuff, and Thunder Barbarian and all this kind of stuff. But in RPGs, I would basically just play, D&D in Forgotten Realms or Cyberpunk, like Cyberpunk 2020. It was really well separated. Either I played like Vampire the Masquerade or something that was really segmented out. This is horror, this is sci-fi, this is fantasy. But with DCC, I learned about the pulp literature. I had already read like Tolkien or basically Tolkien. I didn't even read Robert E. Howard or anything like that. I read the Conan comics, but in the comics they more closer to fantasy than anything else. And with DCC, I learned that there was this other fantasy writers out there from like more than 70 years ago, and they wrote fiction that wasn't really fantasy because back then there was no like, oh, this is fantasy, or just fiction. And their fiction could be anything. You could mix horror, fantasy, sci-fi, anything was there, and they haven't really a label for it. So they played with all the genres, you know.
Yeah.
So
I think DCC might be the regeneration of this idea. Like I think all the guys and all the people that wrote DCC all kind of really enjoyed like Expedition to Barrier Peaks and a lot of those early D&D modules.
I can't forget another game that I discovered together with DCC that does this a lot, and it's fantastic, which is Astonishing Swordman and Sorcerer of Hyperborea.
Right.
I got into it right up at the same time. I have like the first edition, the box set, and it was really just weird. Like it looked really like Sword and Sorcery, but you see spaceships or laser weapons or weird alien and Cthulhu mythos stuff in there because it's based on Clark Ashton Smith fantasy and stories, which is really like a perfect mixture of H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, because they have like this sword and sorcery feel, but with this really cosmic horror underlying it. It's really good.
Yeah, because it's like it's weird because it's almost like the 1920s and 30s was the golden age of this idea because they were like the genres were not codified. Like now genre is very codified. Like you are in a very specific genre. But during that early exploration period, there was really not like all these weird fantasy pulp magazines did not. You could go from Conan fighting aliens to like uh,
Jack
uh,
Vance,
yeah, it's
you
crazy.
know.
Crazy talk. Like John Carter of Mars from Edgar Rice Burroughs, The Princess of Mars. Like you, like he was a Civil War soldier that got dumped
It's
on
kind
Mars.
of,
Like,
yeah. It could be Western if you could do something there, and then go for sci-fi, and it's kind of sword and sorcery too, because like in the desert world we have like these giant seeds and people fight with blades, and yeah,
it just it's almost more unlimited than regular
yeah,
fantasy because you look at Tolkien and Jordan and Martin, they're very much the rules are set. You know that somebody has a document that tells you exactly how magic works, exactly what the world looks like. There is no like it all very cohesive and and laid out very nicely, very smoothly, and there is a lot to be said about that. But to me, and I think you, the excitement of just being able to turn the corner and suddenly they're dinosaurs.
yeah, yeah. And probably the problem is not Tolkien. I love Tolkien. One of my favorite RPGs is The One Ring, and I'm so happy to be writing for it now. I have a small adventure coming in a new book,
Amazing,
and
amazing.
it's like really thrilling for me, because when I started playing again after college, because I stopped after college, I played a year and a half campaign of The One Ring, and it was probably my favorite campaign I ever played. It was so good. And but the problem is not the fantasy like Tolkien, like the elves in the forests and the dwarves in the mountains, and there's this great evil lord. The problem is that's the standard. That's everything you find. It's this. It's the same thing over and over, and it started being repetitive and boring and predictable, and it started to being auto reference, and D&D began being referenced by this literature and this fantasy, these other creators. So with more minds influencing something, it it could be more rich. But after a while, D&D started referencing itself, so they didn't have all this other reference, and started being repetitive, you know. And that's how this fantasy opened my eyes to see that fantasy could be a lot more than Tolkien or D&D, and
You look at the original Appendix N, right? You look at all
yeah,
the stuff that's in there, right? There's a lot of weird stuff in there that we don't even
yeah,
talk about anymore that was definitely influential in Gygax and Arneson and all those guys
yeah.
back then. And I think that's what DCC did is they went and looked at that and went, "Oh yeah, we're going to bring
We
all
need
that
to
back."
bring it back. Yeah,
All that
yeah,
back. But and I think there's just kind of like this underground, it has a little bit more of that underground feel again. And I think that you and I, we grew up with like loving that
yeah,
kind of like, oh
yeah,
we got a comic book, there's some boobs in it, or some dicks
yeah.
or whatever. Like
Yeah,
this is
or bands. I mean, I barely went to rock shows of like bigger bands. I went to like the small bars and the dirty place that had like these punk rock bands that played from your city or the city next one, or from like, oh, they came from all the way from the other state all the way over the country, and that was exciting for me. Like I know these bands that nobody else knows, and they're cool. They pay really well,
yeah, because
you know.
fantasy has become this very much like in the forefront. People are
Yeah,
spending
it's
billions of dollars to produce somewhat boring TV shows about it. Uh,
yeah.
and
It's a product of mass consumption now, you know.
right, where weird fantasy is still too
It's spent,
weird.
you know.
It's still too weird to actually have a TV show like that, right?
Yeah.
Unless you count like some of the old Hercules and Xena, where they kind of like ran out of ideas. Like it's when everybody runs out of ideas that they get off the track. That's like, oh, that's
Yeah, they
interesting.
sometimes make like cool stuff, but they get canceled after like one season, you
Right,
know.
exactly, exactly.
Like
Uh,
Firefly. It's
like
fantastic. It has horror in it. It's sci-fi, but with yeah, it's horror, and there's a little bit of fantasy too because of the
psychics.
powers and stuff.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
have the psychics in there, and
It's Western, it's sci-fi, it's yeah.
Yeah, I would call that like weird sci-fi because it's not
Yeah,
as cohesive as,
yeah.
as a lot of sci-fi. Like if you look at, and I really love um the love, damn it.
Mhm.
It was just on, it just finished. It was a hard sci-fi show, but hard sci-fi is a lot. I like hard sci-fi, but
Expanse.
the Expanse, exactly. The Expanse, I love it, but it actually kind of got weird when the alien stuff kind of came around, right? Because you had the aliens that were
Yeah.
all like in huge reactors with all sorts of people on them and stuff. But it's a very hard sci-fi show, and it wasn't like so. I think that weird sci-fi, weird fantasy, and weird sci-fi kind of, it's very much a gradient. It's very spectrumy.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like a sliding scale. Like you can go from here, and probably the weird can go from here too. So it's like alignment chart, like the D&D alignment chart, like good, evil, and chaotic, and lawful. So it's
I,
weird and normal and fantasy and sci-fi. So you can put your stuff all the way over there.
right, exactly. So it just kind of like you can just drop your coin wherever you like and
Yeah,
find something interesting and some kind of like influences from
yeah.
different.
The problem is just with just one area. It's just 90% of everything that's out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, all right. So we love this, right? I think it would behoove us to talk about maybe like how somebody would play, even if they've got just D&D, right? How you would play weird fantasy, right? It's like, even if, and you've got an amazing lineup of weird fantasy RPGs that they should totally check out. Old Skull Publishing, go to the website now. Anyway, and and just like how would you start? Are you talking about like a world you pull them like down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland, where you're pulling characters that are out of the straight world and then putting them in this kind of like weird world? Or are you talking about like, what's your favorite way to get characters into weird fantasy? Like if,
I think all of these ways are cool, and one thing that I'm enjoying doing now is like begin the game as if it was not weird, but just like a mythical stone. Like I'm making the Primal Age, which it's a weird stone and sorcerer game, which means you have cavemen, you have dinosaurs, you have like uh, ape folk or serpent folk or like this beast kind of people. But then you have aliens, you have time travelers, you have all this weird stuff that for horror or maybe even Cthulhuoid or mythos creatures there. But I'm starting the game basically as this is a mythical Stone Age. So you have people, you have dinosaur people, you have bird people. So they start the game basically as a group of survivors from a tribe, and they start just adventuring, doing stuff they have to do, and they start witnessing weird stuff like some guys that have like super strength because they have a piece of alien minerals stuck on their chest, and they are like recruiting an army for something, and they seem to be talking to someone that's not there. Maybe it's a mineral or not, and they start meeting stranger and stranger things, and like they are from this world, but this world is getting stranger. It wasn't that strange before, but things are changing, the world is changing, and that's a fun thing to do, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it right now. And next session they will witness something like they probably won't listen to this podcast because they don't listen to podcasts in English because I'm playing here in Brazil. And so basically they're like fighting the bad guys. They set one of the bad guys, the leader, on fire, and that guy is dying.
uh-huh.
But the guy has one of the meteorites on his chest, but it's under the clothes. So they will see the guy dying there, and but they witness they just rising up with his face melted and just complaining, "Oh crap! You had to do this with me. I'm gonna have to punish you now because of this."
Yeah, no, that's great. And I like the idea of you're in this weird bucolic, like, yeah, you know that there are dinosaur people, or there are other tribes of different kinds of people, like, and then
Their tribe is like an inclusive type. They accept people from anywhere you're exiled from. So one of the players is a bird person. They have a dinosaur people a person there. Just one, because people arrive there and they're accepted. You know, but things are changing. Like there's this weird people coming from the north. You know.
yeah, that and that's amazing. That's an amazing way to introduce, you know, more weird, as you've got this kind of like otherworldly invasion going on, like or you could just be like walking down the street and you open the wrong door and suddenly you're in Wonderland,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Like, oh, being that fish out of water story, I think, is a lot of fun too. Like, you're talking about you're in the ocean and suddenly the ocean gets a lot bigger. Right? What if you get dumped from the pond into the ocean, right?
Yeah. One of the archetypes I plan on publishing for this game too, it's called A Guy Named Ted, which means it's a guy from California who eats like a full bag of mushrooms and just it's there. It's on this primal world with dinosaur aliens, cave people, and weird stuff. So that's a possibility too. You're a guy from our world, so you can play as someone that has all the knowledge you have right now. And they will have a cell phone, which will be like his magic item.
Right.
And he can do some Google searches and stuff like that.
It's still connected somehow. Like, he doesn't know whether he's just like still in the trip, and he's like,
yeah, because one of the weird concepts of the setting too, it's that time is cyclical. So the past is the future and the future is the past,
Okay, yeah. No, that I have
so the network could be on somehow.
Yeah, exactly. It's still connecting through time and space. I have this like weird thought that, like, in the future, the minds we have today are the trash of the former civilization, or the cities of the former civilizations that were on the planet, kind of thing. Like, that's my like daydream as I look at these giant piles of trash. I'm like, oh well, that will be the minds of our future. Will be the trash piles of our past. Well, what if, like, a long, long time ago, that all these iron deposits were cities of the past that got covered over by stone? So you have this this continuity of, like, because you can't create or destroy a lot of these minerals. They just kind of like reabsorb into the land, kind of thing. It's just a weird thing that every time I drive by a landfill, I always think about. But
yeah. I have one adventure idea that's something related to that. Like, someone goes to the past to do just as you said, like put stuff on their land so they can be rich in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I just put a cask of a very specific alcohol. I buried it, and then I'm going to go to the future and then drink this very aged alcohol from this cask, right? Yeah, it's interesting because I think, it's one of those weird things where, does weird fantasy, do the worlds have rules, or are we just kind of like, well, this week we're doing, because like I think that's the dividing line between fantasy and weird fantasy sometimes, is like, are there these rules that govern the world, kind of thing? Are you setting out rules, or are you just saying, like, just do whatever you want as a GM as long as it's fun? The rule of cool is all you really need for weird fantasy, kind of thing.
I mean, first of all, I think we forgot to answer the question you did, like, how do people start playing this?
Oh, right.
And my answer to that would be, the first thing it would be to play like a adventure model that plays with that gem, so you can get the feeling of what this is, how this goes. Like, play a few adventure models, and then start reading fiction like that, so you can start having ideas and see how things can blend together. And after a while, you even don't need to have these ideas to consume this kind of media. You will mix stuff yourself because in this Primal Quest campaign, I'm GM. I'm mixing Flash from the TV series with The Walking Dead, with Primal, the cartoon, and putting everything together. You can just mix stuff up. But if you start with something that's already made, something already thought about how to mix this stuff, to help you get there and see how this can work and how this can be fun and how can this be something new for you to experience. And sometimes it's fun to see how different fantasy can be.
Yeah, I mean, you look at you can get plenty of your adventures, old school publishing, publishing ventures, right? Or get those ventures, or now 100 DCC modules.
Yeah.
You could pick any one of those up and use it as the basis for any other game. Like that's the great thing about the way a lot of things are written now, is like, you could just sort of like use it in anything. Like my favorite is Mutant Crawl Classics. I love DCC, but I also think that it's even better if you start in Mutant Crawl Classics and just like everybody is a mutant or whatever, and you're all a tribe of people that you're all trying to like get, like try to have a home base. Game. Yeah. And then you can just use whatever DCC, MCC, weird public, whatever, like you're like going to find
Sorcerer and have some really great weird fantasy with a heavy sword and sorcery vibe, but with alien stuff and ancient ones and Cthulhu Mythos stuff mixing in, so it's a good reference too.
Yeah, great. So yeah, those would be, you're right. You should go, if you don't know where to start, go find a module that you think the cover looks cool, because that's all that matters. Just the cover looks cool. And then take that and just like try to run it, or at least then you're like, oh man, that part's stupid, I'm just going to change it, right? And that's how you start getting into getting into that, like more in your wheelhouse.
Every module a good GM will have to adapt somehow for their campaign or their group, because every group's different, but it really helps for you to see how things could be different,
Right. And then, so, like I said, is it when you're building these weird fantasy worlds?
The rules, yeah.
Right.
The rules of the world.
Are we building a world with rules, or are we just saying, well, these are the rules right now, let me wait till I change the deal?
Yeah, that can work, but it has to be some consistency. It's right now, and if nothing changes, it will remain like that. Because unless you because in weird fantasy games, it can be quite easy to go for the gonzo, for like anything goes, and it's funny and it's weird and it's whimsical, and sometimes that can be the game you want to play, and that can be fun and has a lot less rules, a lot more about just being cool and doing weird stuff and having a blast, and that can be fun. But if you want like a more serious weird fantasy game, so you have to kind of have some believability in the way the world works. So as I have said in the Primal Quest, it's a fantasy Stone Age, so there is shamans, there is sorcery, there is dinosaurs, and there's different kinds of people, but that's it. That's like a fantasy Stone Age. But when aliens start appearing there, things start to change. So we didn't have technology, but maybe now they have something because of the aliens. We didn't have anything that could heal people, because sorcery wasn't about healing, it was about transforming. But maybe this technology has a serum that can heal people, and that can be something different. I don't know.
Right. It could really change some people's lives if you have this different. Have the players had the discussion, like what happens if I take that crystal from that meteorite from somebody else's chest and try and stick it in my chest?
They witnessed for the first time the next session when the guy dies and just rises up with his clothes burned out, and they will see the crystal just like emitting some kind of dark radiation, and the guy just talking and with his face melted, and kind of pissed it off, but he know he wasn't going to die, so he's
Right.
pissed it off. He's going to teach them a lesson, but
Exactly. But yeah, that having consistency and like grounding certain things, but then having the makes the weird even more weird, right? Is like, oh, you're
yeah.
like this bucolic setting,
Oh yeah,
and then all of a sudden like this spaceship like comes crashing through the ceiling of
yeah.
your hut or whatever. Like
That's important. For the weird to be weird, it can't be just common, be everywhere, and everybody know it exists, and it's something. For me, it's like for the magic to be magical. For me, you can have magic shops and magic guilds everywhere, and flying things with magic, and all the cities illuminated with magic lamps and everything there. So magic won't be magic. Magic would be something normal.
well,
It's
it's
ordinary.
technology. Like once it becomes like
Yeah,
commoditized and commercialized and it's everywhere, right? It's more of it's more of a commodity and a technology that's fully understood. That doesn't, to me as well, like doesn't bring this like sense of wonder that I feel like magic should. Like it should be an
yeah, but
impossible
I mean,
thing, right? Or at least
even
something that
technology, when it's not accessible, it's rare. It's like something super restrict. It's kind of a wonder, you know. For me, a space being in a spaceship, it happens here. For me, it would still be something like, wow, I can get to go onto this, but uh,
yeah, there's a
it's
transition
everywhere.
point. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
transition point between
Technology can be a wonder too.
right.
You know.
Well, just like you're talking about ray guns and all this other stuff, like we kind of have some of that stuff in certain
Yeah, but
labs,
it's
right?
like super. Yeah, yeah. And,
So,
and if you put that in a game in a fantasy game that has magic and stuff, but it's not commonplace, and there's like a pistol that shoots magic. It's a magic pistol. It's technology, but it's something wonderful, right?
right. And that's what we want from magic, right? And it's not something you're going to get in a lot of like very mainstream games that are very influenced by the video games, right? Of this
Yeah,
single player video game of Final Fantasy and a lot of the other games. Final Fantasy is there's a lot of weird in Final Fantasy games, right? But
yeah,
because it's a single player like grind that you're like playing through, that you have these like magic shops and you have these shops that are selling potions and all this other stuff, just because the game would be impossible to beat without those things,
yeah,
right? Where I think that's not true in an RPG, and it doesn't have to be that way.
yeah.
And I think it's makes D&D and a lot of games
And
lesser
yeah,
because they have that stuff kind of like built
and
into the
and
idea.
yeah, in the RPG, you don't have a path to follow. Like for Final Fantasy, you have a clear beginning, middle, and end of the game. And for the RPG, you don't have to. You don't have that. You don't have to follow the stuff. If you can't go through this because you don't have the right tools or the right magic items you can buy, well, go do something else. Go around. You know, the possibilities are endless. So you don't have to make sure you have everything you must have to win. You know, I
Right.
think that helps too. Yeah,
Yeah. You can't win every fight. We always say that here. We will continue to say it. There is not a sometimes running away or tactically besting something is way better than standing there and hitting it with your sword. So, anyway, I've got some Patreon prompts. We got so the hardest crew in Patreon, our Full Metal RPG zealots, gave us some questions. So I'll dive into these and like let's see where they take us here. So Mike Marines, the homie Mike Marines, says, I've always wanted to ask, and I think this is the perfect guest for the topic, why is heavy metal genre so influential to RPG community?
I have to be honest. I'm not like a huge heavy metal fan. I really like heavy metal comics, like the Metal Horror. That's really influencing for me because of the aesthetic, the stories, the themes they explore. But for music, I'm more like a punk rock guy, you know.
Well, punk
And
rock is just it was like a next generation of metal. It just happened to take another diversion. Like it's
oh yeah,
you
so
know
yeah.
um I think it's because like the roots of the genre with like Black Sabbath and some of the Kinks and some of the precursor bands to heavy metal, and they were all influenced by Tolkien, but they wanted it weirder because they were weird kids, right? They were all watching
Yeah.
horror movies, and they were like, "Well, I think there should be the song "The Wizard" from Black Sabbath is like one of my favorite like tunes of theirs, and it's basically about a wizard that travels the land, and it just he brings doom wherever he's going, and but hope and doom everywhere. Like that was, but it Iron Man and all these things that's the beginning of the genre, and you get all these people that kind of took that and ran with it, and I think that's that aesthetic of kind of Tolkien being big in the 60s and influencing the roots of the genre really brought and punk rock as well. Like there's just this like aesthetic of like punching up in D&D, right? That's the whole like a lot of the is like we're a bunch of farmers that should not
Yeah.
be doing this, and we're going to go get these these lords, but first of all we have to go get some resources to do so. Like there is something very punk rock about the beginning of this, and it's all like published on zines, and it kind of like
Yeah,
everybody's kind of
the
like
do-it-yourself attitude. It's really for me for the punk, because I had a band, I had an indie band. I went to go to this place, and the do-it-yourself attitude has a lot of in common with the do-it-yourself indie attitude, the OSR attitude, and it's exploring weird stuff that mainstream bands wouldn't be doing. So we would do the same thing with our fantasy games. We do weird fantasy that mainstream fantasy won't do. Yeah.
right, exactly. It's like unlike being a game designer, if you go to a place as a band, you might get recognized. So put your picture on the back of the book. That's my tip for all the designers out there. If you want to be recognized, you want to go places and have people like talk to you about your stuff, like what authors used to do and still do is put your picture on the back of the book. Like, hey, I'm Diogo. I'm from Brazil. I love all this stuff. Like, come talk to me about my games. Like, because I've had
Yeah,
definitely some
you can put on the flip side of the back cover, like
right.
that's the
Exactly.
ear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I've had gigantic designers be completely overlooked. Like we brought big designers to
Oh yeah.
conventions, and like dude standing right there talking about the game, and then the designer's like 6 foot away and they don't know who he is. Like it's just hilarious. Like it's a weird thing I would like to try and help people solve by putting pictures on the back of books.
Yeah,
Anyways,
but some people don't want to be
which
recognized.
is
I
fine if
think. I
that's
don't
I
know.
mean the
Yeah.
anonymity of a game designer is like you
Yeah.
could be as anonymous as you like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we got Realm of Jelly, aka Rob. You if you've been caught up, Rob was on last week. He's super jealous. Weird fantasy is such a brilliant genre. I would love to know what your favorite games of the genre influences. What are your favorites that kind of influence this whole thing?
Well, as I said, the DCC RPG and Astonishing Swordman Sorcerer of Hyperborea were a big influence for me, and really shaped how I see the genre and how I see fantasy, because I wasn't aware of Appendix N before DCC or Astonishing Swordman Sorcerer of Hyperborea. And I started reading it because of them, and fell in love with many of the authors. And so those are my big two. But I have to talk about the heavy metal comics, the Metal Hurlant that was from France, and all the artists that made the stuff, and all the independent comics that were influenced by this publication and make weird stuff to this day. Like I love a comic called Space Raiders that it's like for me. I knew about it after I published Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells, and when I got that comic book, I said, "Wow, this is the comic book that would be Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells." And I thought, if I could license this IP from, I would make the RPG for Space Raiders RPG with his art, and it's incredible.
Yeah, Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells is one of my favorites. Like I remember when we played, you ran a short game for us long time ago in the previous age and long ago, and I really enjoyed that kind of like mashup of aesthetics. And one of the reasons I was like, I need to talk to Diogo again. Like it's been forever. We are now here, but I just like I said, I love all this old metal music that has all this influence that turns things up to 11. You look at all the different Edgar Rice Burroughs and H.P. Lovecraft and all those guys, that it's just weird. And the only rule is there's rules, it's grounded, but also cosmic horrors that are going to eat your face because it's just you're in the way. Like
my influence are a lot of stuff from pop media too, like 80s cartoons. So I get this stuff from the pulp fiction, from Robert A. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, H.P. Lovecraft, Fritz Leiber, Jack Vance. I get all of that and mix up with kids cartoons from the 80s and TV shows from today, and that's all influenced me. And I'm not a purist,
right.
I steal from wherever I can, and
that and thus is the correct way. The correct way is just to steal from the best, and also things that are terrible but you can make awesome. Kind of like He-Man. He-Man is terrible, but also there's a bunch of shit that's awesome that you can totally steal from He-Man.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. Exactly the point.
Like
I one of my favorite books of all time is like It's Still Like an Artist, and one of the first things you learn reading it's like you learn to see the world making just one question: is there anything I can steal from this? Yes. Okay. No. Okay. Go ahead.
It's like it sorts. It just sorts real easy at that point. Yeah. All right. Toki, aka Jacob, aka our latest patron, asked, "Is Weird Fantasy a setting or a play style or a both? Undefinable?" I think we talked about this a little bit, but I figure we just like set the record. I think it can be all of them actually, but that's
it can be all of them, because if you take the reference as the fiction that comprise this weird fiction that we talked about, there's kind of a play style, because it's not like the heroic fantasy. It's usually like the adventure fantasy, the OSR mindset. Like these people are after their own interests. They become heroes because somehow their interests align with what is necessary at that time, but they're usually not doing it for the right reasons. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because it's aligned with something they want. They want power, or they want to save their loved ones, or they want knowledge, or they want just to earn some coins.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I think you can do it in any I think you could do heroic weird fantasy, but it's a different thing, right? You're setting up the world in a different way. I think we prefer more of a grounded, more of an OSR, or a small group of people like encountering this weird stuff is more interesting to us, but I can certainly see
anti-heroes, they are after their shit. They will do heroic stuff eventually, but they have to be willing to pay the price too, because it's like a play style that isn't so forgiving as if it would be like a heroic weird setting with aliens and stuff, but the characters are really heroics, and they would do these strange things. They're always assuming to win at the end. If you're playing this play style that's aligned with the RPG that usually do this kind of stuff. Characters are have to be willing to pay the price to be heroic, and sometimes you will die for trying something heroic.
Right. Absolutely. And speaking of heroic, and this is a little off topic, and I made a joke early on, but M Little asks, how do you stay so productive? Because from his perspective, you have made a lot, right? It's a bit off topic, but I think it's a worthy question.
Yeah, I think if we look overall, it seems like a lot, but there has been some times I sometimes spend months or weeks unable to do anything, but I started making something. I started small. I tried to write at least 500 words a day, which is not much. If you sit down and focus on it, you can get it done in half an hour or less. But sometimes I take more because I have other stuff to do. I had other things in my mind. But I try to small steps. The secret for productivity is not doing a lot in quickly. It's like doing just a small amount, but every day, every time you can. So I think the secret for productivity is not doing a lot, but doing just a small amount, but with as much as you can, like every day if you can. Just anytime you can spend like half an hour, just do something half an hour, and that's it.
Right. And I think that's the only answer that works for anybody I've ever. I listen to all sorts of podcasts about about the back end of business and podcasts and all this stuff. And it's basically like, just do whatever.
Remember, it's not waiting for the moves and then writing.
Right. No,
and
no.
that's inspiration. It's labor. Just sit there and force those words out of your brain any way you can. And if you have to write shitty words, write shitty words. When you can, we'll get back and make them less shittier. And
Right.
the next book will be less shittier. And
Exactly.
one day it will be not as shittier as you thought you are.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then 10 Man Prime ask, would love to hear his perspective on what Latin America, I guess Latin America designers are bringing to RPG scene traditionally dominated by said white dudes here. So,
yeah, I don't know. I think everybody can bring cool stuff. The only difference now is that we are organizing to call attention to RPG designers, and we have the opportunity to showcase our stuff in other medias, and people are more accepting to know what we're doing. And because sometimes even on our own countries, sometimes I feel like people from Brazil don't want to see games from Brazilians because they think, it's someone made it here. I want the stuff that the real market is consuming, like the stuff that the foreigners are using. So when this movement has gained strength to have a question being asked about it in a podcast, it's really nice and gives opportunity for people from different backgrounds and different perspectives on what fantasy or what a game should be,
right.
and I think it's fun. It's being really good, and we're producing some really cool stuff. This Primal Quest game I'm making, we have a lot of people from Brazil working on it. I'm writing stuff. We have a Felipe Faria, which is doing illustration. We have Guilherme Gontijo on layout. I have Felipe Salvaterra doing the cartography, and we'll bring something weird and strange, and hopefully I'm looking to introduce more Brazilian prehistoric creatures on the setting and the
Nice.
monster, and exploring this side. And we have ideas for like a Amazon-inspired mega dungeon coming in the future. So
sweet.
wait for it.
That sounds amazing. Are there any games you can like just recommend like right off the top that we should be looking for from other designers in Latin America?
Guilherme Gontijo, the person that's doing the layout, just released a solo game inspired by these horror investigative films called Blurred Lines. It's on Drive-Thru RPG. It's print on demand. The book is gorgeous. It's like a classroom on graphic design, and it's a really fun game to play if you have a time alone. It's on the pandemic. You're at home. You want to play something different, something unique, something with a true Latin perspective. Get Blurred Lines. There's my stuff. There's stuff from Lucas Rolin. Emmanuel Melo had just finished, or it's still going, his Kickstarter for his Cyberpunk game. Let me see.
Is it Cyber plus Punk? Is that the
Yes, it's still going on the Kickstarter.
Okay.
Because it's fantastic. I think it's still going. Yeah, it's 10 days to go.
Yeah.
It's CBR plus PNK augmented. It's a game written from Brazil, and it's being released. And it's really nice, small box set, and it's really something worth checking out.
That one looks really amazing. I knew about that one, but I didn't know it was somebody designed it from Brazil. I'll get some links and I'll stick them in the show notes for everybody. Because I'm definitely gonna check out Blurred Lines, and I was gonna back Cyberpunk because let's just face it, I have a wall of Cyberpunk behind me. I need to collect more of it. So, but but I definitely want to hear. Maybe we need to do a whole show. Bring on some of your friends. Get
Absolutely, yes.
Get some more recognition for people that you know that are down there, that we can get some more recognition. We don't have a huge footprint, but it's every bit helps. So
yeah, there's Gabriel from Argentina that publishes Warpland, and it's releasing a new game from started by the 90s horror shows, like you play as these monsters, and that's doing dirty job from hell, and he's from Argentina. It's really fantastic games. So we can talk about people from all over Latin America.
Absolutely, that we're totally doing that. I'm putting that on the schedule now. And then our old friend Willie B is. What are thoughts about setting the table, the mood? Obviously, lower fantasy settings work better for this menagerie of characters and races. And basically, I think he's talking about. We talked about some of this, but how do you get people to realize they're not in Kansas anymore? Is that and why anybody? Yeah, I'm not going to put any jokes there.
Yeah,
but for weird fantasy,
that's the thing that I talked to you like in the game. It started pretty normal for like a fantasy setting. We have dinosaurs, you have cave people, you have bird people. But you go there. You're going to the north to investigate why your group of tribesmen hadn't returned from their trip that should have been back 2 weeks ago, and they go to a neighbor village, like their friendly village they traded before. But they started going there. They started seeing these gruesome scenes like gore, corpses, and weird stuff being made with them, and they started saying, well, something's different. This is not normal. This is not like a dinosaur didn't do that. Other tribes that live nearby don't do that. And they met the invaders, and then they will see the guy coming back from the dead with his face melted. They start small. If you want to do like the weird, being weird and not just being gonzo, start introducing these signs little bits every time, a little bit every session, just a little bit more, and see how your players are reacting to this.
Right. I mean, so you're, and he's kind of alluding to, are you like, I mean, obviously you're playing your game, right? So it's going to be, they're going to kind of know.
Yeah.
Right,
and you don't present like a Zippo saying, "Oh, now it's a Zippo," and you open it, flames out. You say like, "Oh, you see this shiny object. It's Stone Age, so I can't say it's metal. Shiny object that's heavy and like as a rock, but it's smooth, but it has all these marks that has been used, like it's been bent or something." and then you see there's a mark, and it's something's moving there. As you move, it's open up, and from inside of it comes a flame. You
Right.
don't know how this happens, like magic or something. You have to describe stuff from their perspective.
Right. And I think that's really important to like get into whatever the perspective of the people are, of the characters. That's what you kind of
Yeah.
like have to describe something as. And sometimes if you're like, like coming from a sci-fi setting and then you're adding this weird magical thing, they're like, there's
It's
this
the old trick of not saying the name of the monster, but describing the monster.
right, not saying the name of the move you're making. PBTA
Yeah.
people, like it's like you're showing them telling
Yeah.
them, and not just going, oh yeah, it's just an Allosaurus, it's clearly just an Allosaurus.
Yeah.
But like you're diminishing the object by not just
Yeah.
because you're in the real world, you don't just have a name of a thing like pop up over the top of a thing, right? It's like
Mouse cursor, you go over a person, you see their name. Oh.
right, owlbear, right? But what could make something weird in a cyberpunk game where they have augmented reality glasses is like everything has its name above it except for this one thing, right? It's like
It's weird characters just changing.
right, weird characters, or it's just like it doesn't know it's there, right? And just like the computer knows everything except for that, right? So
Yeah.
you're drawing attention, but you're also amplifying what that is. So
Yeah.
well, very cool. I think that's a great answer to some hard questions from the hardest crew, the Patreon crew, Full Metal Zealots. Really appreciate everybody.
Yeah, thank you. That's good questions.
Yeah. I love your reaction in text is like, oh shit, hard questions.
Yeah, but it made me think, so that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have to always be learning. Always be learning.
Yeah. So I've been skipping this, but I intentionally, because I know how deep your knowledge well is and what you always are vibing on something different. I kind of want to do RPG picks. Like what are you currently like really excited about right now? Like
Wow. I've been really into old school essentials because that's the stuff I'm producing from. I won an award for it, and it's refreshing BX. But a recent game. Oh, I just got the Root RPG.
oh wow, yeah, I just saw just a giant pile somebody got mailed of all this stuff.
Yeah, I made maps for them.
Oh wow, nice.
And I'm excited for it. Yeah, it's a beautiful produce, and I haven't played it yet.
Right.
And I confess I'm not a really big PBTA game.
Yeah.
But the aesthetic of it's gorgeous, and with a 6-year-old at home, I said I gotta get this.
Right. I'm very interested to see if like the board game is actually kind of a hardcore war game. Like it's an asymmetric hardcore war game. So like every faction plays differently.
I can't find the basic game here. I just find the expansions here in Brazil. It's like the basic game is sold out. I can't get it.
Well, I mean that may just be a logistics problem as we are in this new age having all sorts of those. Yeah. But I know because like I help run a library for our local convention, or our local convention has like a big library that we bring in. And every time I'm like there, somebody's kid's like, oh, I want to play Root. And I'm like, I have to kind of go over and be like, look, this is a really hard game that every player plays differently. You may not want your children, because it's going to take you hours to learn this game. I'm really interested to see now that it's out in physical form. I know the PDFs have probably been out forever, but I want somebody to tell me about whether or not it's a hardcore war game masquerading as a cutesy rabbits and bunnies like in the forest game, because that's more interesting to me than maybe the cover. So
true. Well, in another game that I'm really super excited about is Primal Quest, the one I've been talking the whole show that I'm developing, and it's a weird stone and sorcerer RPG that has influence from Fate going from Into the Odds, OSR games, Barbarians of Lemuria, and Genesis, and all my own stuff. So it's a really unique system. You don't have classes. You have like 3 attributes and 5 basic aspects, like their tags, and you can make anything from a caveman to a dinosaur to a birdman to a time traveler. And one single row, you have success or failure with additional consequences or additional setbacks or boons or advantages, and you determine damage, everything with just one row, and it's been working great. The draft rules are public. You can access them and try them out. The initial release would be Primal Quest Essentials. We'll have all the rules and a mini hex trawl, and it would be a free PDF and a cheap like booklet for you to buy. And we'll support the game with a zine that will bring the setting, new rules, adventure, character options, monsters, everything for both Primal Quest and Old School Essentials. So you can play using the Primal Quest system we'll be developing, or this really sturdy functioning that I love BX chassis with Old School Essentials. So stay tuned for that. First, we'll be releasing Primal Quest, and then supporting with the zine, the Primal World of Taya that brings the setting and all this stuff for this and Old School Essentials.
It sounds fantastic. We'll put it's public, right? There's a link to it somewhere. I'll drop that in the show notes for those test documents. It sounds really awesome. I definitely want to, because Fate is one of those love-hate things. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I think Fate Accelerated is much more fun, but
OSR-ish Fate.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm in. I'm gonna look at that document. That sounds amazing. I just want to mention real quick something I'm looking at now is Osprey Games, which has been a miniatures games publisher, has started publishing RPG games. They did one with Alan Barr, but this is Jackals. I think is really interesting. It's a Bronze Age like hardcore fantasy game. Like Bronze Age stuff, I think doesn't get enough. Like, I love you're doing a Stone Age game, and that's really awesome, because I think that definitely doesn't get enough. But, like, Bronze Age, I think that's a fantastically interesting time of history to use. Yeah. So, Osprey Games, Jackal, I think it's really interesting. Check it out. So,
and to mention our Latin author that has a Bronze Age game, you can look for Into the Bronze by Guilherme Gontijo. It's like a Stone Age fantasy game with the Into the Odd engine. It's really good and
very cool.
Looks fantastic too. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna have to have a link exchange here, because this is gonna get pretty long show notes here. So very cool. Well, a couple little last things, and then we'll do a outro and get out of here. So I want to thank the patrons for sticking with me over this time. I really appreciate all your help. I'm working soon. There shall be something that I'm planning on trying the logistics engine on its own. So for something, but stay tuned. But all of the support levels now reflect what you get, which is basically just a Discord reward, because I'm not like Brendan or Adam. I didn't have like a books and stuff I need to sell. I don't have control too much of the t-shirt discounts, but they discount our t-shirts all the time. So check out fullmodelrpg.com for links to where you can buy our t-shirts. I'm in a new t-shirt is in the works. So, but the last season's t-shirt by Wolfmungus is going out the door this week. So by the time you get this on, say, Tuesday or Wednesday, you've got about 3 or 4 days before that's going to sail off into the sunset. I love that t-shirt a lot, but I promised it would be limited. So as part of the contract with Wolfmungus, I know he'd let me sell it forever, but I kind of want to make it special. So if you're one of those people that like, oh man, that's an amazing design, you should maybe pick it up here in the next week or too. I might forget about it next week and extend it another week, but just know it's going away soon. But I think that's pretty much it. Diogo, do you have anything else you'd like to plug or add longer to the show notes before we close out and say goodbye?
I think I've said a lot about Primal Quest, so you can look for Primal Quest or the Primal World of Taya. We have a subreddit for old school publishing now. It's a really active community. It's healthy. We're always putting some previews there. It's been cool, and we share some game design theory posts we have there. So if you want to check that out. And I'm about to release you the Cosmosaurus RPG, which is like a Space Rangers dinosaur RPG, and that's family friendly, and we'll be releasing soon too.
Yeah.
So
I told you you release at least 2 more games by the end of this episode, and he delivered. So
it's already made.
I know. I'm just anyway. Thank you very much, Diogo.
Thank you.
It's been fantastic.
I want
to have you again soon, and maybe we'll talk about designers in your area. Thank you.
They will love that. Yeah, I will love that.
Thank you. Good night. Good night. Raw.